This is a lecture on the energetic drivers, and we're going to go through, first of all, the difference between a driver and an integrator, because they are definably different. So in order to look at this concept, we have to think about the body as a series of cavities that are created where the cavities collect energy from space. We're looking at cavities as collectors of energy. If you're going to have an energy field, it's got to be powered by something, and it looks as if we've got a double powering system, and that's what I want to talk about now. I've just mentioned that there are cavities inside the body, mainly in the head and the bones, but there are cavities within cavities inside the body. These are passive, but they do collect energy. This is one source of power for the body field system. We also have a secondary system which is active or dynamic, which is the organs behaving like small powerhouses for the body field system. The Chinese divided them into hollow and solid types of organs and said there were 12. There may be more, but they thought traditionally about 12 because of an esoteric reason, which doesn't concern us. So we're looking at this sort of structure where we get an organ which acts as a driver. Inside that organ, because of its size, structure and shape, there will be a standing wave, frequency 1, 2 and 3, different frequencies, but still nevertheless there's a wave information there. This activates the pathway through the body, which is essentially the acupuncture channel. We know this goes through connective tissue, so it doesn't actually have to be a single line. It can be a flat sheet. If it's connective tissue, that means a whole area of the shoulder, for example. Information tends to be directional in this system. It will choose to go that way or that way. Even though the information is directional, the wave actually stands still. This is something people get very confused about. The wave is there just to carry the information. Okay, it's the information that's moving. Now when we look at the standing wave of the whole body, we can get an acupuncture channel going from the top of the head to the toe, 6 foot long. So we're going to get a big standing wave. Standing wave of what? We find that this is the internal energy created by the body, which is sending information, but we've got connection with the outside world, gravity and magnetism. In other words, we call it geopathic stress, a very well-known concept, but one that we must use in healing to be successful. So that is the difference between a driver and an integrator. The driver is working on the internal power source of the body field. The integrator, we're talking about the information traveling along a pathway inside the body. Now we're looking at slide 1. After years and years of study, it began to appear as if these 12 organs of the body are actually not just all jumbled up. They will interconnect via planes in the body. These are planes this way, that way, and so on. There are 3 possibilities. The organs will connect to the 3 planes via connective tissues, which are belong to the organ, the nerves going in and out of the organ, as well as blood supply. So all you have to do to remember, there's 3 body fields which are all interconnected, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. Connective tissue, nerves, blood. Any one of them can go wrong, and only one usually has to be corrected to correct the whole big body field. And the big body field, you know, we do a test for that, and the infoceutical for it is called Big Field Aligner. That is to integrate those 3 parts of the body field. Now, once we've got the three axes, over several years of looking at it very carefully and finding out what matches with what energetically, it became clear that the connective tissue system, the nerve system and the blood supply system all intersect at the heart. So if we look at the heart as the intersection of the three body fields, it's the centre. Therefore, the most important part of the body field is that which is generated by the heart. And if you look at slide 1, you will see a map showing an electronic idea of phase errors which can occur between two fields, so that part of the field simply gets deleted. It just gets scrubbed out. So the information the body needs to function never gets to its target. If you're looking at slide 2, you'll see first of all source driver. Source driver is the infoceutical that helps you to store the source energy from space. This is the origin energy. In Chinese it's called yuan, the source energy. So we've simply called it source energy. We don't know what it is, but we think it's pretty sure it's there, and we've done experiments to validate this. The three major fields of the body in the three planes are in fact activated by the source driver. So when you think about it, remember we've got two things driving the system. We've got the source energy plus the organ energy, and together we get an activated meridian which carries information. Nerve tissue itself is able to generate, you've heard of alpha, beta, theta and delta waves going from 1.5 I think to 48 hertz. These are very, very low frequency sonic waves. They become phonons in a solid, so they'll behave in a special way when carried through bones, for example. Now the connective tissue is activated as well, this time by voice sounds, particularly in the range from 500 to 7,000 hertz. The voice sound goes from 500 to 7,000 hertz. And the same with the blood field. The heart sounds here activate the blood field. We went on the net and found that the sound of the heart isn't just lupped up, as you might have been taught years ago in your first physiology course. There are now 134 different sounds of the heart, and they're all important. Now we're looking at slide 3. This slide is about polarity. There's a story about the development of polarity. I was trying to sell an NES device to a lady who had another company's machine, and she said, "Does NES do polarity?" And I thought, well, I don't know, but it's going to. So when she found that the source driver and big field aligner together affected her item for polarity, I thought, well, that's all we need do. And so that serendipitously happened. We simply used source driver and big field aligner together, and it turned out that this matches the negatively charged electron, which is so important. Now I must point out that polarity doesn't refer to polarity therapy as developed many years ago by Dr. Randolph Stone. It's simply a concept about negative ions that could be more related to the work of Dr. Otto Warburg, a man whom you can Google if you want to. He wrote about the side effects of positively charged ions on the physiology of the body. This is right back in 1931. He got a Nobel Prize in 1931 for saying that correct oxygenation is important for keeping cancer away. In other words, aerobic conditions are needed for the body to detoxify itself. Well, that's in terms of oxygen. We're talking just in terms of negatively charged ions are important for the function of the body field. So it's really important to correct polarity. On the slide, you will see that the photons excite the field, polarity excites the field. A negatively polarized electrostatic field has quite a strong influence on the field. The field is our carrier wave of the information. If you want the information to be right, you've got to make sure it's being carried optimally. Cell driver is perhaps the most important infoceutical of all, and I'm going to tell you why, or reinforce some reasons for this. And we look at slide 4. We see a picture of the cell membrane, the nucleus inside the DNA, and we find another structure inside the cell called the centrosome. And here we're talking about the receptivity of the centrosome to geopathic stress. Remember, I'm talking about geopathic stress because it's a mixture, it's an interreaction between the Earth's magnetic energy from the core of the Earth and gravity. There's some interreaction. This is known to happen in physics, and it can also happen in your body. Now, you can go onto Google and look at Hartmann patterns and Curry grid, and you'll be not much the wiser at the end because they don't seem to be measured in quite an acceptable way for scientists. Never mind the fact that there is something there and that the cell responds to it via the centrosome into the nucleus, into the DNA. That's something terribly important because geopathic stress needs to be corrected. To correct geopathic stress, you use cell driver. The centrosome's terribly important because it's the focus of microtubules. And microtubules are terribly important in bioenergetics. Here we have a picture of the cell, a cell membrane. In it there are microtubules. They're quite long, they're pretty narrow, and each of these, because of its length, will have lambda, that is, they're little tuning forks, they're little things that, like antennas, tuned to a certain frequency, and how broad that frequency depends on how broad the microtubule is. The actual frequency depends on the length. Believe it or not, we've got the centrosome as the focus of microtubule arrangement in the cell. That means it looks as if there's some energy related to information that is being transferred to the centrosome, and from there through the nuclear membrane into the DNA. This is looking at the cell as an energetic unit rather than just as a chemical sack of things that happen in a sort of a chemical water bag. This looks like it's terribly important in cancer research. There are quite a few different pictures that go with cell driver, and I'd like to give you 4 syndromes because you might have to pick a syndrome and reinforce what you want in the healing using infoceuticals. Geopathic stress is the first one in what we might call syndrome 1. We can use cell driver with big field aligner, and if this doesn't come right after 10 days, 2 weeks, it's time to move beds or make some change in your life that's stronger than infoceuticals. Syndrome 2 This pattern, you can see cell driver, immunity driver and thymus driver. These three will show up on the screen, and you need to be able to look for them and say, there's a pattern. And this pattern is one that goes with a person with a history of growths, skin tags, lumps and bumps. You'll also find this registering on energetic star 1. In other words, there's something going wrong with the immune system. That means that lumps and bumps aren't being removed from the body. Syndrome 3 is really important, and this one I'm going to talk about quite a lot. Cell driver with heart imprinter. Now, heart imprinter is a new infoceutical, it's a new test, and we'll be talking about that next. But just at the moment, we've found that using cell driver with heart imprinter, we're actually activating the centrosome, the Golgi body, and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. These are two of the major organelles of the body. There is important traffic between the Golgi body and the SER so far as nutrients are concerned. Here we come back to the all-important chemical level. The traffic between these two bodies is thought to be responsible for synthesis of lipids, conversion of cholesterol to steroids, detoxification of foreign proteins, and calcium metabolism of the skeletal muscles. In other words, huge physiological effects. So obviously, if cell driver and heart imprinter come up together, and it's related to a cholesterol problem, a hormonal problem, or a skeletal muscle problem, you've got to use them in the same treatment, but of course not mixed together. And this brings on to the syndrome 4, and this is about cellular detox. If you find you've got cell driver and you look through your screen, you find integrator 8 comes up, even energetic star 14 or 15, with which means heavy metals. And of course vitamin B12 could be low, oxygenation of the body could be low. So remember Dr. Otto Warburg in 1932. It's still right, it hasn't been superseded. The body likes to have high levels of oxygenation in order to detox. So syndrome 4 means that we use cell driver with integrator 8, energetic star 14 or 15. That's a very strong detox. So those are the 4 syndromes that you might be looking out for to treat the cell. We've also got to look now at heart imprinter. This was an interesting one because the way it developed was from talking with an old friend of mine in Australia, Michael Beatrice, who pointed out that there was an integrator that would match with each chamber of the heart, the auricles, the ventricles. When I put them together, something strange happened, and we got a new driver that behaved extremely strangely. Once we'd found it, we found that it links with every positive emotion that human beings are capable of. No negative ones. Extraordinary stuff. The Chinese, hundreds of years ago, pointed out that the heart is the residence of happiness and joy. So I thought, well, we've known that for a long time, but now here we are, we've reinforced it, that we can show by testing that positive emotions, which are so important for healing, come from the heart. The heart is actually imprinting emotional information in the blood field. So I'm thinking really that the emotions belong in the heart rather than the brain or anywhere else. Inability to experience positive emotions means that some aspect of the heart is damaged. I don't suggest you treat clinical depression, but certainly mild feeling down, there is quite a strong effect of heart imprinter. On the physical side, we found that heart imprinter is very good in cases of calcification of the heart, in which case you could link it with bone driver, terribly important for calcification. Calcification of the heart, sclerosis and aortic stenosis. There is some effect of this on triglycerides, which is going to affect the function of the heart and arteries generally. Remember, first of all, that this driver is about the inside of the heart and therefore is important for impending disaster. If there's a big fibrin build-up inside the heart, inside the lungs, inside the brain, this is something you can do, but you need to also consider liver driver and skin driver. I'll explain why we have skin driver there a bit later on. It turns out that heart imprinter is quite important for blood pressure, but if used excessively can increase the blood pressure. So I would say definitely to monitor blood pressure in certain people if they're taking doses of imprinter over a long period. Our basic research has linked heart imprinter with the systole, the peak of contraction, of the contraction phase of the heart. For this reason, it must be linked in some way to blood pressure. 4 chambers of the heart. All heart imprinter is a combination of energetic integrators 2, 3, 9 and 10. That's all. 4 chambers of the heart. Remember, for positive emotions, triglycerides link, systole, and the bundle of His. That's what it should read in the slide, bundle of His. And this is a general treatment for cardiac disease and the chest cavity as a whole. Slide 7 is about the heart driver. Remember I said heart imprinter is for inside the heart driver is for outside the heart. This time it is mostly about the electrical conduction system of the heart, the sets of sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves, which of course are found on the outside of the organ. Energetic integrator number 4 is actually mixed in with this driver, but of course you can use it with integrator 4 as well. Since the first time we ever used this driver, it has been noticed that it affects the texture of the skin. Not so much for pimples and crust, just for skin texture. We were treating people in West Hollywood years ago for this, using skin driver. You will find that the skin actually responds more by treating the heart rather than treating the liver. The liver can in fact make the skin flare up quite a lot. So we leave the bowels and the liver alone and treat the heart. If you want to affect the face, particularly for skin, you must use heart driver with stomach driver. So I'm saying if these two come up together in a test and there is a problem with this, with the skin on the face, that's an indication that it's a good symptomatic approach. Remember too that the rhythm of the heart can be affected for years after a bad influenza attack. It's actually quite common, and sometimes using heart driver you'll be able to correct the heart rhythm. Integrator 6 often comes up with heart driver, and it looks as if when integrator 6 comes up, it's one of those very important things you must correct. The reason being is not so much that with integrator 6 there's something wrong with the kidneys. It does affect the kidneys, but it also affects the nucleus of the cell, the nuclear membrane of the cell. And if the nuclear membrane of the cell is upset in any way, there is chaos in the cell. When you have chaos, you don't get good information transfer, you become sick. So if you've ever wondered why we keep telling you integrator 6 is terribly important, we've got links to the midbrain from Heart Driver. The midbrain is the bit literally between your ears. It's a terribly important part of the brain for regulating most of the body's physiological activities, your temperature, blood pressure, pH, all those terribly important things that do go wrong in chronic disease. So remember that Heart Driver can be used together with Energetic Integrator 4 for simply regulating the entire body system from a physiological point of view. Circulation driver is a new driver that's been added to the system in the new disc. Here we've used a bit of science to try to explain why it is that the heart can't possibly be responsible for pumping the blood around the body. It's just not physically possible. It must be getting some assistance from the circulatory system itself, and there must be a mechanism of propulsion through the arteries and even the veins in order to assist the heart in its job of regulating the whole system. So the circulation driver, you'll see on slide 9, is about the spiral ridges in the muscular walls of the arteries. It's about the heme and about the oxygen, oxyhemoglobin. That is going to have some magnetic effect that is possibly going to propel the blood around the body. Now, so far as what it's for, circulation always goes wrong when there's shock of any sort. This has been known for a very long time. Well, we find that circulation driver is for arteriosclerosis, possibly Raynaud's disease, in which case you'll use nerve driver as well. Migraine, because it's the blood pressure changing in response to nerve plexuses behaving wrongly. You do not use circulation driver for aneurysm, impending clots, infection or inflammation. The idea is it's simply about the propulsion. In other words, it's there to assist the heart in managing the blood circulation. A few months ago it was found that the entire body field is affected by the heart imprinter. Well, this is not surprising because it's at the intersection, remember, of those three planes. And so it's not surprising it's the key. So you can affect the heart by simply affecting big field aligner. Remember, the heart is the center of the emotion in this system. You take big field aligner and the emotions begin to flow. I've heard of lots of cases of very big emotional releases just after big field aligner. You sort of think, how can that be? It's because of the link to the heart. Research is just in its infancy. Please remember that this is only 2.5 years old from the time of discovery to the time of the making of this tape. So many of our ideas are in their infancy, but it's very exciting stuff, and we're happy to tell you everything as it's happening. The heart imprinter appears to have a role in integration of the body field and integration of information within the body. Heart imprinter is going to affect the entire alignment of the three systems. Can I just show you this on the whiteboard? If you're using heart imprinter plus just about anything else, I would say that you're going to affect the misalignment of the body fields. Those three possible planes. Remember, the heart at the middle of these, and the body, to get correct transfer, likes to have 90-degree angles between fields. When it's more than 5 degrees off, the information isn't transferred between fields. Each field needs to know what the other one is doing. Your connective tissue needs to know what the blood's doing. The nervous system needs to know what the blood's doing, and so on. So the point is that here, using heart imprinter plus the drivers which come immediately after it. Okay, you can look on the screen and see the 4 or 5 drivers coming straight after imprinter. When you use those together, you're making what we call a phase correction to the big body field. In other words, this is going to change people's lives quite significantly because you're moving a whole lot of energy at one time. When we do this, some very big healing reactions occur, and I'll tell you about these in just a moment. When we use heart imprinter with other things like cell driver or nerve driver, there can be quite a lot of emotional outpouring and people wanting to tell you what it is without even going to a psychiatrist. I mean, this happens spontaneously and it doesn't cost you any money. Aches in the chest and heart. Aches in the heart, of course, not because there's anything desperately wrong with your heart, but the way in which the heart is functioning as far as information imprinting has changed. Sleepiness. We've had people sleeping for 12, 14 hours at a stretch. It's not because they've been doped. It's not because we've done something awful to the nervous system. This is just pure relief. Okay, that's how the body wants to heal itself, by having a big rest. So I myself have taken these strong phase correction treatments myself and slept on and off for 4 or 5 days. Quite nice, quite a nice rest, and I felt really good afterwards. Often aches occur in every joint because a detox can occur, because suddenly connective tissue is behaving correctly and it needs to get rid of the toxins which might have been there for 10, 20, 30 years. Flaring up of chronic diseases can occur, and many people have reported flaring up of old back injuries. Some people even get little episodic fevers, which is just clearing up old diseases that were never quite cured. I think you should go very, very carefully and slowly with this approach. But you're going to do it anyway because it's going to come up on the screen, so I'm just warning you about using imprinter with other drivers. Keep the dosage down and keep monitoring your patient. The group of drivers that has the big effect is imprinter with cell driver, nerve driver and circulation driver. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about nerve driver itself. This is one of the big ones. How this was born, I decided to go and I studied psychology at university for several years, and I remember they had incredibly big textbooks with everything you want to know except what you really want to know. And I went and looked up how they think the nervous system works. And I got onto this idea of why on earth does the central nervous system produce these strange sounds of different frequencies when it's doing different tasks? From a field point of view, it's because that's the frequency of the field that's needed to achieve that task. Nerve driver is about dendrites, nerve cell, the nucleus, the axons, the perineurium, and it's about reinforcing the sounds that the nervous system makes, if you like. It's not so much about synapses, neurotransmitters and the electrochemical idea. This has all been done by other people. I have heard this very good results from in some cases in sleep apnea just by using nerve driver. Remember that nerve driver is not a sedative. It's a dynamic helper for a damaged nervous system. It's not a stimulant, so you can't OD on nerve driver. If you have too much of it, it simply ceases to work. This is something that we're very proud of because NES appears to be able to treat neural symptoms where no one else can. Allopathic treatments have been devised for stopping the nervous system, but there's very little to make it work better. And of course, we're aiming to make the nervous system work better by simply making sure that information is transferred. It appears that it's not a stimulant, in which case it would have been all right for Batman and Robin. It is harmless stuff. It contains within it a picture of a nerve cell. Now there's the big clue. You will get nerve driver to work better if you use it with cell driver. They're both cells, aren't they? These two go very well together. We're not thinking of the nervous system as a chemically fueled system, electrochemical system at all. This has been used, this is why I looked in the psychology book to start with, to revise my knowledge. I thought, I wonder if they're still saying that. Yes, they are. We're looking at the nervous system as a dynamic information transfer system which uses electrochemical energy as part of the mechanism, but in fact the actual information is in the quantum field. To set the quantum field up, we've got to have an electrostatic field, and the electrochemical part of the nervous system is to set that electrostatic field up. Okay, we have lung driver. This has been made, the infoceutical has actually been made from real lung tissue. It is related to the gas transfer mechanism. That's in order to distinguish it from the bronchial tissue towards, more common, towards the top of the lungs. The key is for oxygenation. We will find lung driver coming up a lot. It's better to think of it really for the chest, not for asthma. If you're using infoceuticals for asthma, it's always better to use cell driver immunity driver and look at energetic integrator 11. The bronchial tissue is related more to the stomach driver than it is to lung driver. There are many, many energy channels that go through the chest. We've got the kidney, we've got the lung, at the side we've got the gallbladder, the back we've got the bladder meridian, and so on. And we do have the lung meridian going through it, but at the bottom of the lungs, it's more influenced by the liver driver than it is by the lung driver. So I wouldn't use lung driver for asthma, just as a general rule. Now we need to look at stomach driver, which is found on slide 11. Stomach driver is a really complex driving system, and it goes wrong a lot. This is the one that's always wrong. The first thing that happens when you use stomach driver is a strong detoxification because of the state of our food. The mucous membranes and muscular wall of the gut all the way through will absorb various toxins. So when you try to make the energy work better, the toxins want to come out almost immediately. And remember, this is the entire gastrointestinal tract. We could have called it GIT driver. Okay, so what do we mean? We mean the buccal cavity, the mouth, we mean the pharynx, larynx, the throat, we mean the top part of the stomach, the middle part of the stomach, all the way through the stomach, duodenum, small intestine, large bowel, but not the rectum. The rectum is in the domain of the kidney driver. There's something here which might be incredibly useful to you clinically, so I'll show you a diagram. Here we see just a fairly primitive diagram of a stomach. The top part where we're going to get gastric regurgitation, I would suggest circulation driver. The middle part of the stomach, the fundus itself, I would suggest stomach driver. And the duodenum, the valve system and so on, this lower part, perhaps from here onwards, and the duodenum, we would use pancreas driver. That's going to help you greatly in your application so that you can target the tissue that you wish to. Now we also need to talk about stomach driver because of its effect on the frontal lobes. There will be some mental reactions to taking stomach driver. It's the one that you could use initially in Alzheimer's disease. Remember, for affecting the cranium itself, you should always think of stomach driver, kidney driver, and heart driver. For the cortex, the motor cortex, you should always think of integrator 7. The sensory cortex, you should always think of integrator 1. For the corpus callosum, you should always think of integrator 12. And for the midbrain, you should always think of integrator 4 with heart driver. And if you're just thinking about the brain generally, it's kidney driver. All right, that's a very general approach. So the stomach has a remarkable effect on the eyes, the frontal lobes, the throat, mouth and lips, and so on. Used also for treatments of skin. Do not use for the rectum, of course. I've said before that belongs to the kidney driver. If stomach driver won't come right, there is a reason. There could be a huge load of cadmium, mercury, or lead, most likely cadmium, in which case environmental cellular detox is energetic star 14, heavy metals energetic star 15, and of course kidney driver. The stomach and the kidney help each other. If you don't get the stomach driver right by treating the stomach driver, this sounds Irish, but you treat the kidney driver instead to help the stomach. And vice versa. The same occurs with another thing that occurs like that is when the heart energy won't come right, you can treat the energetic integrator 7 for the gallbladder. They seem to affect each other. Now we need to talk about muscle driver, which is slide 12. It refers to striated muscle or skeletal muscle only, not to cardiac muscle. Heavy metals have an affinity with the stomach lining, and cadmium in particular. There are matches to certain types of diseases here, which you should remember. Reduced muscle tone, arthritis as a number one treatment, use muscle driver. For the weakness of the muscle itself, myositis and myelitis and myofasciitis. If you're looking to treat myocardium, it is better to look at the combination of energetic integrators 11 and 12. But here we're just talking about skeletal muscle, and in particular for muscle diseases including mild arthritis. A skin driver should have been called epithelial driver. It's a bit late now, but remember we said we could also use that for tendency towards excessive fibrin developing in the arteries. Epithelial tissue has a role in the development of that excessive fibrin. So skin driver can be used for people who are tending towards strokes. It's not for strokes. For strokes you must go to hospital. It's also for ear, nose and throat, ENT. It matches acne rosacea, catarrh of the nose, of course, nose and throat, colitis, Crohn's disease, and allergic reaction at the skin and bowel tissue. Sometimes we don't use skin driver for skin diseases, so I'd like you to think about it as being skin of the internal organs and the epithelial tissue of the circulatory system as well. It can be used for inflammation of mucous membranes of joints, and so will come up even when there's nothing wrong with your skin. NES is not a diagnostic system. It is not for diagnosing skin disease by getting skin driver. All right, having said that, we can move on to liver driver. This is a very complex one. The liver does just about everything physiologically, naturally. We have tags on it linking it to liver cells, centrosomes, pancreatic alpha cells, beta cells, several types of lymphatic cells, and even the vagus nerve, the alveoli and centricina cells. There are matches with alcoholic poisoning, threatening blood clot, that is high levels of fibrin and the other things that go with it, liver congestion, gout, hyperinsulinism and lymph of the liver. If we're treating lymph anywhere in the body, you think of liver driver, but you can also think of pancreas driver. Don't have to use them at the same time, but you can alternate. One of the main functions of the liver is related to the breaking down of larger molecules that have to be excreted. Please remember that the liver energy channel goes back behind the eyes to the top of the head. We could have called this the eye driver. It's terribly important for all difficulties with the eyes. Remember, we've said that it's not a good idea to use liver driver and pancreas driver together, and people keep going, oh, what if you do? Well, there's no need to, because the liver driver includes links to the pancreas as well. So for regulation of blood sugar, either way, if it's too high or too low, liver driver can be used sparingly and carefully. The liver driver will give more energy to the meridian. A branch of this meridian goes to the scrotum in the male and the ovaries in the female. I have heard stories of increased semen production. The prostate gland, of course, belongs to the kidney driver and lung driver, but may also be influenced by liver driver. Liver driver and cell driver used together for geopathic stress. That is the strongest treatment possible for geopathic stress. And the indicator for geopathic stress is big field aligner. It is wrong a lot of the time. Quite common, geopathic stress. A new liver driver, there is a new formulation for this driver. It's the same as the old liver driver, which had liver cells in various lobes of the liver and circulation around the liver. We decided that it needed making a bit stronger, and so this new one, which has been introduced already, has 4 energizers for the liver. These are the cell nucleus, the centrioles, the Golgi body, and the mitochondria. In other words, we've combined elements of the cell driver with liver driver because it's just different sorts of cells. We've found that this has different effects from the old liver driver, and I'd like to tell you now what these energetic links are to names of diseases, if you like. I've got here headaches, but not migraines, not severe headaches, just ordinary headaches, vascular headaches, if you like. Excessive fluid retention and edema will respond to liver driver. Excessive oxalic acid in the urine and gouty arthritis, the new liver driver, will have some effect. Macular degeneration. People are always asking about macular degeneration, which is a side effect of diabetes and other diseases. This one links with liver driver. Dyspepsia, of course. Optic neuritis is irritation of the optic nerve itself. It can be something like neuralgia behind the eyes. Pain behind the eyes, okay? That's what the symptom would be of optic neuritis. Essential hypertension, well, of course, everything is for essential hypertension. Hypertension, the body blood pressure is maintained by a very complex arrangement. It's beyond us. Gouty arthritis, we've mentioned. pH correction and regulation is an important one. Most people get to have an acidic pH of their intracellular fluid. So liver driver will bring it towards normal, whether or not it's up or down. It is not suggested that liver driver is for jaundice and hepatitis, same thing I guess, because we have 3 different energetic terrains for different types, hepatitis A, B and C. That is preferable. The idea is that you don't stimulate a sick organ. If you've got jaundice, hepatitis, you're stimulating a sick organ. It's better to go and look at the cause, and if the terrain is there, well, that's a definite cause. Hemicrania, migraines, it is not a good idea. Sometimes stimulating the liver will be enough to set one off, and you'll lose the confidence of your patient, which you must never do. Last of all, not necessarily a good idea for degenerative diseases of the liver. It's better in that case to use cell driver. Now we look at kidney driver. We should have called this cell nucleus driver, but it also has a correspondence in physiology with the kidney tubules and the kidney membrane. It links with swelling of the kidney organ, renal colic, nephritis, but it also links, interestingly enough, with concussion, where there will be damage to the brain cells. It can also come up simply when there's intoxication of the brain tissue. If the kidney driver shows up, it does not mean there's kidney disease. It is not a diagnostic thing, it is a healing thing. In cancer cases, kidney driver may show up simply because it represents the nucleus of the cell and the cell has become chaotic. Immunity driver is particularly important because it stimulates the function of creating more immune cells in the blood. This happens in the bone marrow. There are blastic cells, red blood cells, lymphoblasts, plasmablasts and macroblasts. Mast cells are found in this immunity driver as well. Splenic tissue is related. This driver is not so much about antibody formation for various diseases. For that, I would consider thymus driver. I would talk about immunity driver in terms of lymph cells, which of course is one of the main ways in which the body defeats viruses of all types. And as you know, there are many, many, many categories of lymph cells. We haven't done any research on which ones out of those we're affecting, but because we're looking at the blastic cells, we think we may be affecting them all generally. Remember, this is a slow-acting driver that can take between 5 days to 28 days or 2 months to develop and mature a new blood cell. In spite of all that, sometimes immunity driver works very quickly. Hint, if you look at slide 16, it's using cell driver and immunity in the same protocol. Don't mix them, but use them together in the same treatment session. Okay, and slide 17, we have pancreas driver. In the early days of NES, we only had 3 drivers, and then we had 5 drivers, and Harry kept saying, the drivers are good, can't we have any more drivers? I said, no, we've got them all. And Harry eventually persuaded me after months and months to develop the liver driver and pancreas driver, for the reason that Harry had a pretty crook liver, and that's what was needed. Now these have turned out to be mainstays of the system. Pancreas is a dual organ, has several functions. We have tagged the islets of Langerhans, the alpha and beta cells, the vagus nerves as well as lymph, the head of the organ and the tail of the organ. It also contains integrators 4 and 12. This is the most complex of all the drivers. The pancreas is a double organ. It does lots of things and it goes wrong all the time. The pancreas is incredibly sensitive to environmental toxins. It matches to indigestion, pancreatitis, lack of appetite and hypoglycemia. This driver may not show up in the case of diabetes mellitus. It may show up indeed as an error in big field aligner. And this is because there are a whole series of very serious and hard to cure diseases, for instance diabetes mellitus, diabetes insipidus and so on. You say, how could it be possible that a person who has diabetes doesn't show an error in pancreas driver? It does happen, and that's because there's a major alignment problem of the organs with the 3 planes. In other words, you correct the heart imprinter for a few sessions with whatever else. Sure enough, the pancreas driver will begin to show up as a problem. Okay, thymus driver was added very close to the last one for the correction of immune system errors that didn't come good with immunity driver, and it's because thymus driver is for long-term immunity patterns which, when upset, the person develops allergies. Now, we're not saying we can cure allergies, but certainly once the immune system has started to behave wrongly, a lot of diseases will follow. And very often treatment of thymus driver will bring the immune function back towards normal so far as long-term immunity is concerned. It may indicate the failure of the antibody system of the immune systems. It's for long-term viral immunity and may show up in a test when there is low-level chronic viral disease like chronic fatigue syndrome. For attempts at antibody formation, we can use energetic terrains, of course, after the thymus is corrected. And bone driver, which is slide 18, bone driver is simply a combination of liver driver, pancreas driver and kidney driver. I was inspired to put these 3 together because they mix together in the energetic system according to the traditional Chinese system. They all link at an acupuncture point called San Yin Jiao, 3-yin crossing, which is a very important acupuncture point, and I thought maybe it's an important driver. It turned out when you mix these 3 together, it has an effect on slow knitting of bones, for enlargement of the heart, osteoporosis, calcified tendons, calcified organs generally, premature brain aging, which can be related, of course, to errors in the calcium system. Calcium metabolism is the basis of 10,000 different physiological processes in the body. So you've got to get it right. And believe it or not, you can even use bone driver for tendency towards formation of clots. There's another one. There's an extraordinary story about an enlarged heart here of a woman aged 70-something who visited the NES opening in Australia just to tell me that her husband had been suffering from an enlarged heart. He was in his 70s as well, and everybody thought this was the end. He went to bed and they thought he's never going to get up. He had some bone driver. That was all, I think. And after 2 days, the heart swelling went down. He could breathe again. The heart began to behave normally. He got up out of bed. Now, this is extraordinary stuff. It is not at all clear why the heart, the lungs or the kidneys or any other organ suddenly becomes large. Would it not be because it's desperate for energy, so it makes itself bigger to collect more source energy? The bone driver helps energy go up the body from the toes to the head. If you haven't got enough energy at the top part of the body, you use bone driver because the information is travelling upwards with this. All right, well, that concludes the talk on the drivers. I hope you understand them more, and we will continue with another talk on the integrators.